do the first, probably, if it's big, of another series that I'd like to do with comparing uh, old properties in horror with their new remakes, what they did right, what they didn't do right, and what my problems is, especially when it comes to the concept of remaking. So this is like a short introduction to kind of get you started on where my gist of this segment is and what I'm trying to accomplish by doing these. Now, I think these movies can be directly compared to each other in the sense that this compare and contrast, this very first video, is about Candyman. And surprisingly, Candyman is one of my favorite horror villain protagonist, depending on how you look at the story. And I would put this above stuff like Halloween and Jason and Chucky and Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'll tell you why as I go into this deep dive of both properties. But if I had to rank my favorite franchises, and that's with my bias towards Friday the 13th, because essentially it was what got me into the genre, I would say Candyman would rank number two if I was to do, and I might do top horror franchises, but that's only if people really love this video. But I would say Candyman would be my number two because not only did the original do social commentary well, but it also created this figure that's very ambiguous. Most of these killers don't have very good motives for doing what they do, but Candyman's story is a bit different because it's very tragic. I'm a sucker for romances, and Candyman to me is the inverse of that romantic tale, where you have this tragic romance between a slave and, the slaver's daughter, and the realization of what happened, and it really happened in those days. The fact that these people did this horrendous thing to this man, and he was an artist. He wanted renown and fame, but also he died tragically in such a, like, I want to say, young point in his life. So he never got the acclaim that he should have got, and he never got to be with the woman he loved. So this is a multi-layered tale that, going back to it, and watching the original and comparing it with the new one, I see what the issues is between both of them. And look, I'm also going to get into the politics because there's quite a few in the new ones, and I'm going to tell you the reason why the politics don't work. Not that I hate them, but why they made a mistake in the way that they messaged the movie and how it really destroyed the new Candyman versus how the old Candyman tackled just about the same issues. Slightly modern spin on this one, but it was the same gist, but written better. And now, this concerns me because the director of this movie, Nia DaCosta, is supposed to be doing the Marvels. And I can see that she's very talented, but there's that hint of putting message over story that plagues a lot of these new writers. And the shame part is, there's something good in this new movie. There is good stuff in there. But it's bogged down by this need to hammer home these messages that could have subtly been put into this movie smartly and made a compelling film. I would say this could have reached the heights of topping the original just with the quality and the way it's shot. All the actors do a great job. There's nothing wrong conceptually with this movie as far as the acting structure, the way the story unfolds, the pace, the time. It's aligned well, but it's just when they do these scenes talking about these different topics, it takes you out of this movie. So I want to compare both of the originals and kind of point out where the faults are. And there's faults in the original movie. It was made in 92. So there's quite a bit of very 90s kind of writing. And what I mean by that was the way that women were portrayed in horror movies got better. I could honestly say, and look, I'm not one of these people, but I could say it got better over time. But right now, there's this thing like Hollywood is still the way it was, and that's not the case. People already know about these issues, and it really drags down a horror movie or any movie when you're hammering home these points. So, this first video is kind of a setup for the love that I feel for horror movies and for different properties, but in particular, I want to start with this one because rewatching the original, I realized how much I love this movie. 92 movie starring the great Tony Todd and a couple of other well-known actors and actresses of the time. So I'll list some out. You probably won't know them. This is more around my time period. But we got Tony Todd, Virginia Madison as Helena. You have Vanessa Estelle as her great kind of sidekick. She plays Anne Marie, and I'll get to what happens to her later. We have Xander Berkeley, yeah, Xander Berkeley, who plays Trevor. Ted Raimi, who's Sam Raimi's brother, he's in a quick scene. And Kenneth A. Brown. That's just to name a few. So, a brief synopsis of the Candyman is Candyman is Clive Barker's short story, which the movie is based on, called The Forbidden Love. And it follows a Chicago graduate student completing a thesis on urban legends of the Candyman, the ghost of an African American artist and son of a slave who was murdered in the late 19th century for his relationship to the daughter of a wealthy white man. So, off that title alone, this movie already has that kind of social commentary in it. And Clive Barker made horror where there was a lot of tragic circumstances, but it also had some kind of message in it. And that's why a movie like this is perfect for social commentary. And I'm not one of those people who say you can't have social commentary in a film. Especially horror is synonymous with social commentary. Night of the Living Dead was one of the first ones to tackle the issue of racism and man's ability to kill what they fear or they don't understand. There's been a lot of great horror movies that have had these fantastical elements that are grounded in some kind of realistic social political message of the time. And hell, even regular movies have Platoon, you know, Full Metal Jacket, those kinds of things. There's been movies forever that have made commentary, but it's not whether or not you put commentary, but it's whether you make a story wrapped around that engages people, which Candyman does. So let me talk about my pros first. So pretty much I got a long list of pros and not very many cons. So my first pros is the setting is in Chicago in a neighborhood known as Cabrini Green. It's a project of some sort, and shout out to the people who shot this film in the 90s, and that'll be my credit for the new 2021 version, is that they shot on location. And in the newer version, it changed because those projects were taken down, a lot of buildings were demolished and things like that. But in this 90s original, they shot in the area, and you really get that gritty urban feel to it. A place that's lauded with people who are dealing drugs or single mothers trying to live out their life, trying to raise their kids, and the sort of hardships that the community that they're talking about goes through. And it's not, this version doesn't downplay the elements of what the African American community goes through, but it doesn't demonize the elements of the white or Caucasian group. It highlights the break societally that was very common in the 90s. This anti drug laws and kind of the hypocrisy behind that whole movement. A bunch of different interesting things that are tackled, and really, as Helen is doing this investigation into the myth of Candyman, she starts not only investigating the myth, but the people behind the myth and seeing what their lives are like and how this urban legend was built on desperation and how people were suffering. And Candyman is almost revered. He's seen as this mythic figure. So she goes in and she's looking up this legend, and she's assaulted by this guy who has taken the mantle from the original Candyman and used it as sort of his way to build his drug empire. And I don't want to give too much away because I feel like if you haven't seen the original, you really should. It's a great movie. It's about an hour and 45 minutes or so. I showed my beautiful lady, Bitchy Unicorn. She absolutely loved it. Thought it was very terrifying. So it's a good watch. Definitely check it out. But there's two subplots going here. There's the legend of Candyman, and then there's the backstory and the tragic love story that's in this movie, and that directly ties to the main character. And both of these storylines converge in the final of this movie, and it is just absolutely fantastic. So let me get to the directors of this film. The director of this film is Bernard Rose. And Bernard Rose does some great camera work, excellent cinematography. And another highlight of this that should be highlighted is the music. Philip Glass does the infamous Candyman theme song. And I would play some, but you probably get copyright struck for having that music in there. But you guys can look it up. Just put in Candyman theme song on YouTube. You can look it up. It's got a very haunting piano kind of sound. And it's become synonymous with this character. There were spin-offs 2 and 3. Unlike most, I like 2. I absolutely hated 3. But 2 was more of a copy and paste of number 1. So this franchise did kind of stall out, and I always did want a remake of this, just not what we got. The budget for this film was 8 to 9 million, and in the box office it made 25.8 million before it was out, so it was very popular with people at the time. And so a couple of other positives is the finale of this movie is absolutely just amazing. There's tons of gore, tons of really, I want to say, visual, thematic elements that hit home. And there's 2 storylines running, and the way they come together at the ending is absolutely brilliant. Bernard Rose, when they made this movie, absolutely had a clear direction and purpose on where it wanted to go, and took these 2 separate storylines, the tragic love story and this urban legend of Candyman, and it's just brilliant filmmaking. The aesthetic, like I said, is very dark, gloomy, especially around Cabrini Green. There's this sense of foreboding that these people are living under the weight of this myth. And the reasonings for the antagonists are simply extraordinary. You can't talk about this movie without talking about Tony Todd's performance. Tony Todd has this voice, and it really elevates the character. And he's like, the most infamous line, and I love it, and when he looks at it, he's like, be my victim. And he's like, you and me were meant to be forever. Like, he's got this voice that really captures that gravelly, kind of dark, really scary feel to this movie. He's simply terrifying with the way he portrays this character. But also, there's a lot of layers to this performance because at the same time, when he's going through the story of what happened to him, there's this sadness. And when the camera pans to his face, there's a sadness in his eyes and in the way that he's explaining what happened to him and what his overall goal is. And his goal is basically to be remembered. And I think that's the thing that hit me the most about this. Unlike most serial killers, he doesn't want fame of just killing these people, right? He's not a Michael Myers or a Jason. He doesn't kill just to kill. He is terrified of being forgotten. And as an artist, that makes sense. But as a person whose life got cut short, that also makes sense. And his attraction to the main character, you find out, is a descendant of his love. And he wants her to join him in death so they can be together forever. And there's something really touching and tragic about that whole setup. It's like picture losing the person that you love and having these horrendous things happen to you, and you live through a myth of people saying your name in the mirror 5 times, and then, you know, kind of a slave to having to kill them. And he's only killing these people to keep his legend alive, because when the legend dies, he dies. It's kind of like a Nightmare on Elm Street thing, except for it's more of that this urban legend has to spread. And when Helen went and this Hook guy took his mantle and then she confirmed it, she made people stop believing in him, and he was losing his power. So through her and the acts of violence that happen, which people think she's going crazy and she does, it's perpetuating the myth of the Candyman, because his plan seems convoluted until you get to the ending and you see everything he's done leads to this point of this ultimate sacrifice. And he kidnaps this kid, and there's a big bonfire, and they're trapped in the middle of it. And throughout this whole thing, even the end, when, you know, the heroine wins, it's such a tragic end because nobody really wins. She gives up her life to save the little boy, and he dies alone, and she's not going to be with him. And that kind of sets up in the second movie, or I mean, the end of this movie, the beginning of the second movie, but it's like he's still alone. And all he has to keep him alive are people talking about him and keeping this legend alive. And when the legend dies, essentially he dies. And it's really sad because when you think about it, at the end of the day, this is an example of what all people want. We all want to be remembered. We all want a legacy. And his child was killed during that time period, and the only legacy he has, unfortunately, is through fear. And the other thing about this movie, and we'll get when we do the compare and contrast, I'll get to where the second movie messes this up, was Candyman was indiscriminate. This wasn't based on race. He killed people by just saying his name, because the more people that died, the more his name was perpetuated to the masses. And I thought that was pretty cool. So at the end of the day, it wasn't a thing as a symbol of hope, but it was more of a fear. He kept fear locked into this story, these groups of people. And it had a big question of morality, because he doesn't care. He kills black, white. He kills everybody in this movie. Like, he doesn't give a shit who you are. If you say his name and you summon him, you're going to die. And I found that really interesting. I found that intriguing. The way they used the mirrors, the death scenes, everything worked. And especially the end. It has one of the best end gotcha moments where you're just like, wow. And you felt like you went on this wild ride. So what would I give it? for negatives. My negatives are this movie is very much a product of its time. Some of the shot composition and the filming doesn't age very well. It's very 90s style of filming, so it doesn't hold up as well. That's not to say it's crap. It's just to say you could tell the age of this movie by watching it. Uh, Also, to some of the characterizations of the people within the community is very, very generic. You got the drug dealer who's, this black guy instilling fear into the community. You have the single mother trying to raise her kid. You have the standard stupid police, which follows to this day. And you also have the racist people in there. There's a lot of sexist jokes in here, too. Look, I'm not one of those guys, but this was very much a product of its time. So there's a lot of jokes where you look at them and go, "Wow, that does not age well, given the climate that we're in today." Which is fine. I mean, this was what the '90s was, and unfortunately, that was a part of filmmaking. There's also the damsel in distress until the very end. She's a great character, Helen, and has an evolution, but she's very stupid, and it drove my girl crazy too. It was the horror cliche of the white people. No, but like that sort of like helplessness. They trip, they fall when they run. The kind of horror cliches we got used to in the '90s. Reason why they're cliches, right? And constantly screaming. Um, those kind of things that are old school horror. Other than that, this is an excellent movie. If you haven't seen it, watch it. So my rating for the first part of this, which is Candyman 1992, I would give this movie a 9 out of 10. This movie hasn't aged particularly well, which is the point off. There's a lot of things that just don't look as good as they probably did in the '90s. But for how old the movie is, and for the message that it conveys, for the excellent love story, and for the just crazy ending, like this ending is like a no fucks given, balls to the wall, crazed ending that where you watch it and you go, wow, we started out slow here and then we got to this, and it's just like by the end you're like, WTF, what did I just watch? So that's part one, which is the story of the first Candyman and my thoughts and ratings on that. And next is going to be part two, which is Candyman 2021. So everybody enjoy the next one. There's going to be some ranting. Quick spoiler warning. Spoilers. Spoilers. Because in order for me to break down why this movie is not as good as the original, I'm going to have to spoil some things, particularly the ending of this film. So if you don't want to be spoiled, once again, final warning, this is spoilers. Everybody else who's seen this, then let's enjoy this conversation. So, let me do what I did before, and I want to give you some background about this so that you get an idea of how this film started. First, let's start out with the basics. So this new Candyman made in 2021 was written by Jordan Peele. So I want to make this clear. The writing in this movie is written by Jordan Peele, which disappoints me. I'm still going to see Nope, but it really concerns me about the direction his movies might be going. And you'll get why when I get into this. So it was written by Jordan Peele and Win Rosenfeld and De Costa, which is Nia DaCosta. She is the one who directed this movie and apparently had some writing credits in here too. The film is a direct sequel. Now, here's the thing that got me. When this film was promoted, a lot of people didn't know what this was. It looked like a remake, and I went into this thinking it was a remake. It is not. It is like Halloween, and I'm tired of films doing this. Stop fucking doing it, okay? Not everything works like that. Halloween worked because it had convoluted sequels. This doesn't work for Candyman because you could do a setup like this because 2 and 3 weren't that great, but they could have went with this sequel idea, but did a better. I'll get into it. Anyways, it is the 4th film in the Candyman series. So there's a 2 and the 3. The second one is Farewell to the Flesh, and the third one is Day of the Dead. It's based on the short story The Forbidden by Clive Barker. The film stars Yahya Abdul Mateen II, Taya Paris, Nathan Stewart Gerard, and one of my favorite people who's a very underrated actor, Coleman Domingo. If you don't know, he's from Fear the Walking Dead. I'll get into his character when I get into that shit show. It also has Vanessa Williams, Virginia Madsen, and Tony Todd also reprises his role very briefly, and I'll get to that too. So, plans for Candyman. Now, this is the interesting bit. So, I really want you to pay attention because this is the interesting part and really highlights this problem in Hollywood. But there were plans for another Candyman film to begin in the early 2000s with the original director, Bernard Rose, wanting to make a prequel film about Candyman and Helen's love. However, the studio turned it down and the project entered development hell. In 2018, Jordan Peele and his company Monkey Paw Productions signed on to produce. And later, in November of the same year, it was confirmed that Peele would produce the film, not direct it. He had some writing credits and producing. So this is as much of Jordan Peele's fault as it is Nia DaCosta. I think she was going off of mostly what Peele and this other chick wrote, Rosefield. So DaCosta signed on as the director and principal photographer for the film beginning in August 2019 and wrapped in September 2019 in Chicago, Illinois. So shout out. I'm actually pretty close to where this is all shot. Candyman was theatrically released in the U.S. on August 27th, 2021 by Sony Pictures. Its release date was delayed 3 times due to the zombie pandemic. The film generally received positive reviews from critics who praised DaCosta's direction, visual style, and social commentary. The film grossed $77 million worldwide against a $25 million budget. Now, why is this all important? That last part, the social commentary. Holy fuck. This movie is one of those movies where if you needed to make an argument about the woke culture and social commentary, this movie is the epitome of what that argument is about and how it takes a great idea and ruins it with this political bullshit that they have to put into this film. And I'm going to get to the social commentary in a separate section, but let's not be too hasty. Let me not give this movie its due. So let me praise some things, because there is some things in this film to praise. It's not all doom and gloom. And it's the reason why this film pisses me off so much is not because it's a terrible movie, but because it's a good movie that has potential to be great, and it had the potential to surpass the original if they didn't have the fucking commentary in there. And this is a prime example of where your message destroys the movie, and the movie puts the story in the background and frames the message, and it so much wants this message to work that it literally has to destroy the Candyman lore. And you're a sequel. Now keep in mind, this was intended to be a sequel, so you can't use the excuse of, oh, well, this is a reimagining. It isn't. They came out and said this is supposed to, and the movie implicates this is a direct sequel of the first movie. Okay? So keeping all of this in mind, commentary ruining the story is very much a relevant point. So, the good parts to this film. Mia has a great sense of shooting. And what I mean by that is this movie is very clean. Unlike the 90s version, and I rewatched this movie for the sake of this review, again, just to get a good feel and everything. The cinematography is gorgeous. The locations and how she kept the foreboding feeling, even shooting some of the original scenes from Candyman 1, was all handled pretty well. The makeup effects. There comes a point in the movie where Yaya, he has started to transform into the Candyman, and the practical effects, which you could tell it's practical effects being used, are stellar. Even the mixture between CGI and practical were done so well that it was really hard to tell which was CGI except for maybe the blood. But the rest of it looked very well done. The scarring, the reveal of Yaya's Candyman, all of that is done well. It's done really excellently. I liked it. That was all good. There was a part in the ending, and this is the good and bad of this movie. The reveal and how this connects to the first movie is good, but how they get there and then the motivations for Domingo Coleman's character is so convoluted and nonsensical that it ruins everything that's come before. And the very end, when they have Tony Todd come back, is such a fucking waste. But we'll get there in my negatives. But anyways, that, and it was cool seeing Tony Todd back in the role he made famous. Really, the problem with Yaya is he doesn't have Tony Todd's voice. So it doesn't have the same gravity that the original film had. And so it's hard when he transforms to picture anybody but Tony Todd being in this character. Just with the way when he gets angry and the way I hear his voice and his inflection, he doesn't have the same kind of really gravelly voice that Tony Todd has. So it's really jarring when he kind of starts to transform to take him as a serious threat. And it's the same problem that the new Friday the 13th movie had. Granted, that was a direct remake, and this is a fucking sequel. So anyways, we'll get into that. So that part is all very well done. Also, some of the themes and the characters are good. I will say they throw in the stereotypical characters, which is ironic because as stereotypical as the 90s version is, and as much shit as I gave that, this one is highly stereotypical. You've got the black gay best friend who's with the white dude, because interracial couples. And we've got the girlfriend, and of course, this is more centered around a black couple. So you really take out the element that was in the first movie of a white woman seeing that the other side doesn't live well. And I think that's where the social commentary hit better in the first film as opposed to this one. You have no contrast. Everybody who is a white character in this movie is bad. And this isn't one of those Batman quotes. I mean, I literally mean every white character except for the gay friend. I forgot his name because as funny as he was, it just didn't stick. But his partner is the only decent white person in this movie. Every white person is made to be either stupid, snotty, cold, rude. The cops are all bad. It's very on the nose. It's very on the nose. So because there's a lack of balance, even with as good as these actors and actresses are, there's nobody to balance the perspective. So the story suffers because there's no balance in the way the characters are written. And it's directly even said out loud that the white characters in this are portrayed as assholes. And you can make that argument for when they're in Cabrini Green. I grew up in New York, so I know there is racism and prejudice, but they go out of that section, and everybody who is a different race is racist or mean or rude or tone deaf, and it makes the movie feel tone deaf because there's nobody for you to root for. And this is my problem where you can do this because even Get Out had its share of characters who were just in a bad situation, or Us had just a black cast, but you had the white family, and they were fun. They were friends with the black family. There was a nice diversity there, so that when they died, you were like, oh man, that sucks. I kind of liked them. And I mean, Jordan Peele played around with those characters, but they were still likable. In this, there are no likable characters that are of different ethnicities. So it makes it feel like I'm not welcome to this movie. And it's funny because Candyman is one of my favorite movies. And I'm sitting here watching it, and it's almost offensive to how it portrays its other characters. So while the main core cast is good, the side characters are trash. And the myth of Candyman, they play around with it, and some things they add work and others don't. So let's get to my negatives because I got far more of those. First off, the pace of this movie is slightly off. They open up with a great scene, and it hits you right away, and then it's kind of slow getting into this myth, and you get into Yaya's character, whose name is Anthony Macau. He's play off the first one, and he starts painting these paintings, and he's commissioned to do a work to bring influence to the urban community as this douchebag, of course, white paint gallery owner guy who has an exhibit coming up. Of course, he's a douchebag. He's commissioned to do a painting about the urban struggle, blah, blah, blah. I excused it because it's the world of artists. And as we know, that sounded like something a curator would say, right? Like, yeah, I want you to capture the struggle of the black community. And there is some good play off that. So I thought it was going to be balanced. But oh boy, this movie goes off the rails at the end. And so basically it goes back to Cabrini Green, where the Candyman mythos is formed. He starts acting around. He talks to Domingo Coleman's character, William Billy Burke. Now, there's a flashback from the beginning and to the end of this kid who sees this man with a hook, and the man gets gunned down by police officers. Of course, they're all white police officers who don't ask any questions. They just shoot this guy without saying freeze or nothing, which is fucking bullshit, but whatever. And so he witnesses this, and he's telling bits and pieces of the story. Now, there was a twist that I liked in this. The character of Helen from the first movie is portrayed in two different ways in this film. And in the beginning, you hear the story that Candyman wanted. And I thought this was excellent because it worked with what happened in the first film. After directly watching that and watching this, it plays off of it nicely. So you have the legend of Helen that other people that weren't there tell. And she went crazy, and she cut off this dog's head, and she tried to burn a baby alive, and the group of these people who were having a bonfire were watching, and they tackled her, and they saved the baby, but she went crazy and jumped into the bonfire. And then they tell the actual story at the ending, which I'll get to, but it was really cool because that part of the movie showed how legends and myths are explained by different individuals, and it kept with the first movie. So anyways, going through, and stuff starts happening. Now, a couple of problems I have, and the first one is the way Candyman is used. In the first movie, it made sense for people to say his name because it was part of this study that they were doing for a thesis. So when the main character says his name and all this stuff starts happening, he's framing her to build his legend. In this movie, People just fucking say Candyman for no fucking reason whatsoever. No reason. And I will give them one thing. The black actors and actresses in this are hilarious because they didn't make a joke about how white people always do dumb shit like that. And there's a part where the gay couple, the white guy in the gay group, he's like, oh, I'll say it, and he's like, no, honey, black people don't do that shit. I thought it was hilarious. It was a nice play. And some of the humor, as far as that goes, was hilarious because it's the play on horror tropes. Yeah, for some strange reason, people have this ability to go and say who's in the room, or go into a darkly lit room, or say a fucking urban legend's name in a mirror 5 times and shut off the light and Bloody Mary and all that bullshit. Like, yeah, I'll admit it, white people do that dumb shit. So it was funny and them calling it out. Now, my problem doesn't come from that. My problem is Candyman in this movie becomes an avenging kind of figure. And it pisses me off because the whole thing that made Candyman unique was that you understood why he was doing what he was doing, but you never condoned it. It wasn't meant to be glorified. He wasn't this avenger. He was a tormented soul. He was a product of a terrible time. And it really takes away and degrades the character by making him almost a Marvel-esque hero. And I'll get to that at the end of this fucking ridiculous ending. But it builds him up like he's this avenging angel and like it's a mantle and anybody can become Candyman. And as far as it was established in the actual novel that this is based on and the movie that this is supposed to be a direct sequel of, he is doing this to be remembered. He doesn't do it to save everyone, and he does not care who you are. White, black, purple, guy, girl, other. He kills you if you say his name. It keeps his legend alive. In this one, it's used as a weapon against corruption. And it makes it another generic supernatural film. It takes away what makes this character special. And it grinds my gears because they really, with the setup of this, had something unique that could have been a great, worthy sequel. And they fuck it all up at the end of this film by throwing in this political bullshit about the cops and systemic racism. You could have made that movie and still had Candyman if the writing was clever enough. But it beats you in the head every scene, and it's so over the top with the way that they set it up that you can't take anything in this movie fucking seriously. There's a scene where these 4 white catty girls are at this school. I'm gathering in Chicago, and they're all doing their thing, and nobody talks about Candyman as a legend or whatever else. They just bring up, oh, there's this story, and oh, I dare you to say it. Like, there's not really even a setup. These 4 girls go in, and she goes, go ahead and say it to her friend, and her friend says it in the mirror. And then this black high school student comes in, and they start pushing her and bullying her. So she shuts the door, and she's using the bathroom, and then all of a sudden the door locks, and these 4 young high school girls get fucking butchered. And it's like, why? So, let me get this straight. Candyman only killed them, I guess, because they said the name, but that's inconsistent because at the end of the movie, when the girlfriend says the name, I guess Yaya became the new Candyman, and that was the whole purpose. I'll get there. But he doesn't kill her. He kills all of the cops around her. So the myth and how Candyman works in this movie is very fucking inconsistent. And it only seems to serve as a way to move forward the plot instead of being what the movie is based on. And what I'm saying is, the first movie used Candyman as the framing for the story. This uses Candyman as a way to move a plot or to make a kill happen. And it takes away from what made the movie special. Like, the first one with the art gallery people, I gave a pass to. Because, the douchebag art owner, the guy who commissioned Yaya in the beginning, his girlfriend he's with says Candyman's name, and they die in the art gallery pretty brutally, and I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense because the girlfriend was doing the commission for Yaya, and she knew his file. Or I'm just gonna call him Anthony because that name gets confusing. So the character Anthony, this chick does the commission, and they're about to do it in the middle of the art gallery with all these windows. But anyways, so she says his name, and then all of a sudden she starts like blood just burst out of her chest, and she's lifted up in the air, and that's pretty cool. And then the dude is actually pretty funny, but it's like, okay, that kill was because they said his name. The girls in the bathroom just randomly, I guess, heard of the legend and said his name. It's never explained. It's just four white girls, and I guess because they needed to show that bullies need to die. So, because these girls were bullying that one girl, they fucking deserve to be eviscerated. Okay. The art gallery guy is because he's racist. Like, you see where I'm going with this? All these kills were social commentary as opposed to making sense to the story. And that's where this fails. And then the biggest slap in the face. So, huge spoilers for the end of this film. Candyman finally gets so Domingo Coleman, keep in mind, he is a fellow black character. So now I'm really fucking confused about this message. So there was a guy who they called the Candyman back in the day, and the flash from the beginning of the movie was Coleman as a little boy, and he sees this guy, and the guy just gives him candy, but because another guy had put razor blades in this candy, and they thought it was him, the cops shoot him dead. So he wants to make Anthony the vessel for Candyman because he was supposed to die, and I don't know, they don't explain it in the movie, but apparently there's some intrinsic link between the two. And because he was supposed to die, but Helen sacrificed herself to save him, he is now the new vessel and going to get the torch of Candyman. And here's where it gets convoluted and confusing. So, Domingo Coleman's character, William, or Billy Burke, wants to use Anthony as a vessel and creates a phone call to the cops to kill him so that he'll become part of the legend, so he can summon him to take out the corrupt police officers of Chicago. What? What the fuck? According to the legend, Candyman does not kill a designated, like, police officer, fireman, ambulance, or he doesn't kill based on what your status is, or your social status, or if you're a cop, or if you're an art gallery guy. Candyman kills if you say his name 5 times. It's the most easiest premise. But they make a convoluted story about how he wants to weaponize him and use him as a spirit of vengeance against the corrupt system. Like, oh my god, what the fuck? This movie's ending is so mind-numbingly stupid that the plot goes so far off the rails. And they have to do this plot because William has to call the police. The police have to come, which, by the way, they have to shoot Anthony when he's already down on the ground and clearly dying, and William cut off his arm and put a hook on there, and you can clearly see where he's cut off, but the police come in and shoot first because cops are bad. I gotcha. And the girl is in the back of the car, and she says, the cop's saying, well, we need you to say that he was armed and we were doing our job saving you, and I'm rolling my fucking eyes at this point. And then she looks back and she goes, can I see the mirror? And she goes, Candyman. It says his name 5 times. And then you see the police officers that are in the building come out, and they start getting fucking eviscerated. And then the cop who has her gets pulled out of the police car and fucking eviscerated, and then unlocks the doors she's in, And she goes in, and then they do this weird blend of the new actor Yahya Abdul with Tony Todd, and his voice mixed with Yahya's. Because I looked it up, they blended both voices together, and it ends with him saying, "Tell everyone about me," and it's like, okay, so Candyman's now gonna be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's the Avenger of these wrongs. How does this connect to the first one? If the new Candyman and the old Candyman are both sharing the same body, then don't their goals conflict with each other? Because spreading his name, he would kill you regardless of your color. Or is he just going after white people now? I'm so confused. The fucking movie just ends there. There's no explanation about this, no reason why it happened. Uh, Clearly, Anthony's dead, but did he come back because she summoned him? Was it specific to the person who summons him? I don't fucking know. The movie doesn't explain it. And the thing that pisses me off is when this movie tries to be scary, it's scary. There's legitimately some scary scenes. There's a scene in the preview where you see him in the elevator and all the mirrors. You see Tony Todd's Candyman and he kind of yells through them and then it cuts and he steps off the elevator. There's a couple of really great kills. Like, even the ones that are fucking stupid are good. And here's the other thing, the kills, there's 3 kills. I counted them. 3. There's one in the beginning with the dude getting shot, or yeah, that was the first one. There's the curator guy. There's the 4 stupid girls in the bathroom, and then I guess you can kind of count Domingo Coleman, his character dying, Billy. Guess you can kind of count that as a kill, and then the cops at the end. So I'm sorry, 5. But it's so spaced out with bullshit, slow plot development, loads of talking, and building up the what could be a great ending, right? Because Yaya finds out he's the baby from the first movie. They build all of this up, and then the ending just stupid. It lets everything they built up down so hard. If they would have ran with he's becoming Candyman because he was the baby he was saved and he was supposed to die, and he just kills everybody because now he's the new Candyman. But this subplot, what William wanting to create and weaponize the Candyman, is so fucking stupid. And then the fact that they run with it at the end of the fucking movie makes no fucking sense, and they don't explain how the mechanics work. So you're left by the end going, okay, so can anybody summon him now? And if you've been wronged, he'll avenge you? Like, I don't understand. And the movie doesn't explain it. It is the most ill-conceived, contrived bullshit ending, and quite frankly disrespectful to what the original movie was trying to say. The original movie tackled racism, sexism, and, you know, urban legends, undying love. Like, it tackled those things so well, and to see this 2021 movie just shit all over that and boil it down to such a basic concept is actually really, it pisses me off more talking about this, because there's a point in the movie about halfway where it's really good and you're wondering where it's going, and then the third act just shits all over what the first 2 acts set up. And it's sad because you could have had your commentary about, like, these cops and things like that if you had everybody die and then the cop says his name and he comes through and kills him because he doesn't believe it, or something. Any better setup. But for her to randomly summon him and then see original Tony Todd's Candyman and his voice and everything, it confuses you. Because if you watch the first movie, how is she still alive? Look, I guess the spread is the... Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad. So anyways, This is part 2 review. I give this one a 4 out of 10. This is this gets high points because it's shot well and the premise starts off good, but politics and nonsensical writing fucking ruined this movie. Is my issue with 92 Candyman versus 2021, and it's a weird versus situation because I guess 2021 would be in a sense a sequel, but it does toy with the original mythos, so I feel like it's almost a reimagining, wanting to be a sequel but wanting to make its own little spin, I guess, on the mythos. And the problem where it doesn't work is how most of these IPs that get tampered with don't work. It's a taking of the mythology established and trying to bend and contort it in such a way that it fits into the story that you want to tell. And I'm sure here, with the way that this is structured for Candyman 2021, is that it feels like two different stories, one that wants to talk about police corruption and then one that wants to talk about Candyman. And they're both so at odds with each other that by the end of it, it feels like a puzzle. And they have shaven the pieces in such a way that when you try to put the puzzle together, it fits, but it fits twisted and contorted. And it makes for a really poor product. As a sequel, this doesn't work because it doesn't add anything new, and the stuff it does add new, it doesn't do anything that makes sense within the confines of its own story, forgetting the overall major lore, but just within its own story. Everything is so contrived by the end of it that it doesn't make sense and betrays the rest of the movie. 92, on the other hand, is brilliant. The way that the story comes together, the way that the first director really had, Bernard had a clear vision of what he wanted the story to be. And he followed closely to Clive Barker's story, which was tailor-made for commentary of this kind. And it baffles my mind that you wouldn't continue with that storyline because there is a place in this universe to talk about systemic racism and all of these things that Candyman talks about, but to not beat your audience over the head. And I think the biggest thing with the 92 versus 2021 is this need to treat the audience like we're idiots and we don't know these things exist. To go, oh, hey, look at this terrible thing going on. It's like, yes, I saw the news. I know this shit exists. But what does this have to do with your movie? And for me, the problem with commentary is not if commentary is in a product, is does it make your product better? And if it doesn't, then are you just making this product to say a message? Or are you making a story that has a message in it, that has something to say? And those are two very different things, because you can spout from the heavens about racism, police brutality, and yada yada yada. Or you can make a compelling story that takes one subject, a torn love, right? A love of the ages, a man victimized and a victim of his circumstance. And you can make that into a compelling story that also weaves hints of racism and the way that the black community is mistreated and how things are perceived, white versus black. You could do all that. But I feel like writers have lost their ability to have subtlety. And that's what 2021 versus 1992, that's the biggest difference between these two movies, and why a lot of people, and I'm not talking about critics because of course they're going to fucking praise it, because God forbid they say a logical thing against a movie that clearly has issues. And I'm not talking about from a technical standpoint. The sound design, the camera angles, the shots, it's all great stuff. She has a real good eye for framing your shots and creating tension. The problem is the story betrays the rest of this art. So I don't fucking care about how beautiful you make something if there's nothing of substance to say about the what you're making. If you're just beating me over the head but you're not giving me logical reasons to how one thing leads to another, then you lose me at the end of this film. And that's the tragedy, because I think, and I really believe this is not just me saying this movie could have been a worthy sequel. This movie could have easily been in my top 10 favorite movies of 2021, but I didn't even mention it because it's not even fucking worth mentioning, because the ending goes so... The movie disappointed me so much that it took me doing a review of this to talk about how disappointing 2021 was. Because the movie does, and I mean somewhere out there in the universe, it does have a great sequel. A wonderful sequel that is being, that is just out there and begging to be made. But this movie wasn't it. This was 2021, 2022, fucking all the way to 2018 politics. And this is a very good example that nobody pointed to. Everybody said it sucked, but everyone was scared to say why, and I'll tell you why. This is a movie that was ruined by its social messaging as opposed to the story. The story was backseat. It was peripheral. The message was all that it was about. And Black Christmas did the same thing. And when you do movies like this, nobody cares, nobody's interested. And I'm going to do good recent movies, and you're going to see those movies may have commentary, but it's artfully and skillfully done. Whereas this is like a sledgehammer, where Candyman is more of a tap on the shoulder. A tap that tells you, hey, this is what happened. And it's subtle, it's nuanced. The portrayals, the performances, the hint to what's going on. Even the snobbiness of the art galleries, and in the other one it was the college world, right? The deans and stuff like that. And the pompous nature of these people, these elitists, was so well portrayed in 92. Yet here we are in 2021, and everything is so on the nose. And so in your face, and directors seem to think that the audience has gotten stupider, and the problem is the audience hasn't. They've gotten more tone deaf to what people want. You can still do great movie with subtle messaging. It can be done, but you've got to have that art, and I'm afraid that no new directors have it. And even Jordan Peele, he doesn't escape this criticism. He wrote this script. So some of this was his ideas. And I can see the horror and the themes of racism and stuff. The subtle jokes feel like his. And then this other person, Rose, whoever the hell she is, and Nia DaCosta, heavy-handed. You could see the heavy-handedness. Because Jordan Peele strikes me as a person who could do these themes and tones very subtly. And I don't care what anybody says, I Will Die on the Hill, Get Out, and Us are great ways where you can take the horror genre, make social commentary, still make it entertaining and fun to watch, but get a message out of it. I loved Us. If you saw my car video, I praise this movie. I will praise it till the end. It is, to me, one of the most fantastic horror movies that came out this year. Easily in my tops. It was such a brilliant, and there were so many layers to how he got that message across, right? About the duality of people, about the way we suppress who we are, the different things about, united together, and that kind of movement. All of these things are so subtly done. Get Out, the subtle racism, right? We all have those friends who pretend that they are all about the black community, and those are the ones who are the most racist. And I like how the movie shows that, and it doesn't beat you over the head with it. The ending is where you drop the ball and you go, wow, these people are fucking crazy. But it's done in such an engaging way, and this is the problem that this movie has versus 92. And I feel like somewhere in this world there's a cut of this movie, or there's a universe where this movie was made and it was compelling and get passionate, and it was made with heart. But this one screams as having bullet points to hit, and it doesn't have the heart and the soul. It doesn't have the love story. It doesn't have the intrigue. The character of Candyman is used as this vessel for a message, as opposed to being a real fucking character, as opposed to being this fleshed out, tormented soul that had a horrendous thing happen to him and he wants vengeance. A love story. And they go for something complex and deep, and at the end it just comes out shallow and pedantic. And those are the differences between the two. So what do I have to say? Go see 1992. Don't waste your time. If this is a sequel, it's worse than Candyman 2 Farewell to the Flesh, because at least that canonically kept in line with what happened with the original Candyman. Jesus Christ. Anyways, in the comments below, let me know. What do you think of the style of video? I know it's a little bit longer than I normally do. I'm probably going over like an hour or something. Tell me if you like these styles of videos, and tell me, what's your favorite series? Do you like Candyman? Did you like the new Candyman? Or are you like, oh, Zod, you're an asshole, you're a white supremacist, you don't understand how this stuff works? Or are you like, yeah, I get what you're saying. This movie kind of walls off a certain section of its audience, and it made me feel like shit. In the comments below, let me know. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, remember the only rule here in the fandom zone: kneel before Zod.